As far as the alleged conversion of the Khazars, you can read it in Yehuda Halevi's book, The Kazari, that it may be true that as there is debate and discussion there are Turkic people a little over 1,000 years ago, that some of the leaders or some of the people did, in fact, convert to Judaism and then became part of the larger Jewish people. Khazars as a whole disappear from history. Khazars as a whole disappear from history. Khazars as a whole disappear from history.
And so when he's saying he's coming to redeem, while he would say, redeem Israel, O God, out of all their troubles. First thing they need to be redeemed at, more dangerous than Hamas, more dangerous than Muslim neighbors, are internal these, and there's another biblical name, these who say they are Jews and are not.
I was going to ask you about that. In Revelation 3:8, I think, I was going to ask you that question. Does that refer to this time, or can it refer to this time?
It can. It's Revelation 3:9. Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Yeah. And there's a different application for it, but we understand this is really there's a practical storyline I've shared before on a program maybe a year ago, I don't know, about the Khazarian mafia and the Khazarian Jews, and I'll just say the briefest understanding of it and how this applies to them, because it's about 1,000 years ago. Really, these are almost like marauding tribes, not like tribes of the tribe of Israel, but they're based out of the Ukraine, ironically or not, based out of Kiev. And these were those that would go around, take new lands, and they were known, they had brought the Babylonian religion with them. They were doing cannibalism, human trafficking, no boundaries, sex interaction. They were so wicked that the story goes that he who led, I believe he was a Tsar of Russia, when he had won a battle against him, gave him an option. And in some way or another, this is a truth that they were told, again, 1,000 years ago, you must choose a religion. You all are worthless people. You're not training your kids into any kind of civility, reasonableness. And he gave them a choice of the three Abrahamic religions, and the three Abrahamic religions being either, at the time we'd say Catholicism, Christianity, the other one is Islam, and the other was Judaism. And so they, in a very pragmatic way, the Khazarians chose Judaism because the Pope and the Vatican, they were very hands-on, forcible conversions. And so it was not a light thing to go under that, nor was it Islam. It's a heavy yoke on both. And so Judaism would leave them alone. And so they did some things of incorporating some level of, they weren't, first of all, they were not Semites.
That is one of the most ridiculous, error-filled, ugly, despicable rants I've heard. I don't know how else to describe it. I've got whole books on the history of the Khazars, a Turkic people that cannibalism, human trafficking, sexual immorality, there's nothing in historical accounts associating them with that. That's number one. Number two, they were not forced by a czar to choose a world religion. Complete myth. You might as well tell me that Abraham Lincoln was counseled by Elvis Presley about freeing the slaves. That has more historical truth to it than this drivel that we just heard on a major charismatic platform, as Steve Shultz and Jonny Enlow speak. And it's one of the standard anti-Semitic lies that today's Jews are not really Jews, or Jewish leaders in Israel with Ashkenazi background are not really Jews. It's one of the standard anti-Semitic lies.
I have called you, and I'm not alone in this, many Jews have called you an anti-Semite. I've also talked to people who say you have a really sweet heart, just so you know. You and I have a number of mutual friends in the world. But I think it's important to first identify what anti-Semitism is. It is a different type of hate than any other type of hate in the world. And if you and I are speaking crossways because we have a different understanding and definition, that's not going to lead to any dialogue. That's not going to lead. Look, I said to Scott, I'd love to walk out of here and say, you know what, I was wrong, and write an article, I apologize, and I was wrong. But the first piece is to have a mutual understanding of what is anti-Semitism. I think that would help a tremendous amount.
I
Do you agree with
actually
that?
totally agree with you on that. That is a perfect place to start. Could you
Okay,
provide for us a definition of anti-Semitism?
Anti-Semitism is a hate against their religion. By the time you get to the 18th and 20th centuries, when so many Jews have assimilated, they are in culture, they are in arts, they're in science, it's no longer against them for their religion, it's against them for their race. Because anti-Semitism is the oldest hate in the world, and the hate that mutates.
You said it's a hate that mutates.
Correct.
So your belief then is that the definition of anti-Semitism can necessarily change. Is that correct?
It's not just my belief. It is the commonly accepted understanding in both the Jewish and academic worlds.
As far as the alleged conversion of the Khazars, you can read at Yehuda Halevi's book, The Kazari, that it may be true that as there is debate and discussion, there are Turkic people a little over 1,000 years ago, that some of the leaders or some of the people did, in fact, convert to Judaism and then became part of the larger Jewish people. Khazars as a whole disappear from history. That's it. End of subject. There is no Khazarian mafia. There is not a single Jew on the planet that can be traced back in any definitive way to the Khazars. Zero. There is not a single Jew on the planet that can be traced back in any definitive way to the Khazars. Zero. There is not a single Jew on the planet that can be traced back in any definitive way to the Khazars. Zero.
There is not a single Jew on the planet that can be traced back in any definitive way to the Khazars. Zero.
Are you familiar with the Kazar theory? There's a theory, it's widely accepted as anti-Semitic, that Ashkenazi Jews come from the Khazars and they're not Levantine. But DNA tests.
It's not anti-Semitic. It's a question of fact. So Shlomo Sand, for example, has argued that, I think probably exaggerated, but it's simply a question of fact. If my ancestors from the Ukraine have Khazar roots, changes nothing. I'm Jewish. My grandfather was Jewish. My family happens to have a story saying that we're descended from the Baal Shem Tov. Okay, that's part of the culture. Doesn't matter what the DNA shows.
There is not a single Jew on the planet that can be traced back in any definitive way to the Khazars. Zero.
First, let me, when you see Ashkenazi Jews sharing high similarity to Romanians and Hungarians, this is because both of these populations were offshoots of the Khazars. They were both founded by these members of the Caucasus who ruled this area of north of the Black Sea, where we have South Russia nowadays, between the 7th and 13th centuries. Very powerful empire. They converted to Judaism in the 8th century, and they sent offshoots to Eastern Europe. And we still, some Ashkenazi Jews are mapped to this region of Ukraine. They're not all mapped to Ashkenaz. Most of them are, but some of them are mapped to Ukraine, and we can see very nicely some kind of migration route using GPS.
There is not a single Jew on the planet that can be traced back in any definitive way to the Khazars. Zero. So this is a totally different group of people now, right? This nation, this people called Ashkenaz, nothing to do with Israel, nothing to do with Jewish people. Well, who are they? If you will look at virtually every major Bible dictionary, Bible encyclopedia, here's what you'll find. I'm going to read to you, for example, from the Anchor Yale Bible Dictionary, one of the most respected Bible dictionaries, multi-volume. Who is Ashkenaz? Here's what you see. The first descendant of Gomer, who is the first offspring of Japhet in the table of nations. In Jeremiah 51:27, Ashkenaz appears along with Ararat and Mini as a kingdom called upon to oppose Babylon. The name is identified with the Neo-Assyrian Ishkuza, who appeared between the Black and Caspian Sea in the 8th and 7th centuries BC, driving out the Cimmerians. And it goes on. Who are they then? For Herodotus, so a famous historian in time before Jesus, these people came to be called the Scythians or Scythians, right? We could read through the rest of that in detail, but this has nothing to do with Israel. This has nothing to do with the Jewish people. This has nothing to do with Ashkenazi Jews today. It was an ancient people called the Scythians or Scythians, and they leave society, they disappear, they're all gone a couple thousand years ago. This has nothing to do with Ashkenazi Jews today. It was an ancient people called the Scythians or Scythians, and they leave society, they disappear, they're all gone a couple thousand years ago. They're all gone a couple thousand years ago. They're all gone a couple thousand years ago. You say, well, where did the name Ashkenazi came from? So a little over 1,000 years ago, as Jewish people scattered around the world had now emigrated in Europe and now were living in the Rhineland in Germany, they looked at the name Gomer in Genesis 10, and they connected Gomer with Germany, so they took on the identity of the name Ashkenaz. It has nothing to do with Ashkenaz in the Bible, which is a descendant of Japhet. It's just a name that was taken. Okay, it's that simple. Just like my last name Brown doesn't refer to the color of my skin or anything else. It was shortened from a Russian name when my grandfather came over at Ellis Island. The name got shortened to Brown. It's just a name. That's all it is. So the idea that Ashkenazi Jews are descended from Japhet is a myth, 100% false, zero truth to it. Just study the history. As far as the alleged conversion of the Khazars, you can read it in Yehuda Halevi's book, The Kazari, that it may be true that as there is debate and discussion, there are Turkic people a little over 1,000 years ago, that some of the leaders or some of the people did, in fact, convert to Judaism. Some of the leaders or some of the people did, in fact, convert to Judaism. Some of the leaders or some of the people did, in fact, convert to Judaism. As far as the alleged conversion of the Khazars, you can read it in Yehuda Halevi's book, The Kazari, that it may be true that as there is debate and discussion, there are Turkic people a little over 1,000 years ago, that some of the leaders or some of the people did, in fact, convert to Judaism and then became part of the larger Jewish people. Khazars as a whole disappeared from history. That's it. End of subject. There is no Khazarian mafia. There is not a single Jew on the planet that can be traced back in any definitive way to the Khazars. Zero. Absolutely zero. Some of them may have willfully converted to Judaism, maybe mainly the leaders.
This is what comes to mind as I listen to Professor Michael Brown explain himself. Let me summarize what Professor Mike Brown said. He says the ancient Ashkenazi people, who are also known as the Scythians, left society, disappeared. They're all gone a couple of thousand years ago, but a little over 1,000 years ago, as Jewish people scattered around the world, immigrated in Europe, living in Rhineland, Germany. They looked at the name Gomer, which is the father of Ashkenaz. They looked at the name Gomer in Genesis 10, and they connected Gomer with Germany. So they took on the identity, the name Ashkenaz, and that it has nothing to do with Ashkenaz in the Bible, which is a descendant of Japheth. It's just a name that was taken. He said in regards to the Khazarians, which are the same people, some of the leaders, some of the people did in fact convert to Judaism, but the KHAZARS as a whole disappeared from history. There's not a single Jew on the planet that can be traced back in a definitive way to the Khazarians. Judaism really informed who I am and my values and my worldview, Schaufman said. 23andMe hasn't made me more or less Jewy at all. I'm just Jewy. However, Schaufman added he's Jewy and white, while other Jews, Sephardic Jews, Ethiopian Jews, can't claim that distinction. He's an ethnic minority, but a white one nonetheless. I get all the benefits of white privilege he acknowledged. And again, this is why DNA testing is forbidden in Israel. This is why an assertive effort by the Israeli community to have 23andMe remove the Khazarian connection to the Ashkenazi Jews. They'll still show the map of the region, but they removed Khazarian from there. They'll still show the territory of Russia, Ukraine, Germany, minus the name Khazarian. And again, this is why the Negro, the Africans, were excluded from their testing and why it is forbidden to do DNA testing without court approval in Israel. So again, not a single Negro or African group was included in any of their testing. They were very selective of the Eurasian people groups they chose in an attempt to manipulate their expected output. What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was Abraham, born in the city of a black man called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons, for real, and these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10.